Hi 7th graders, I hope you've been doing well. Today we're going to do lesson 3 of unit 6. It's all about the percent proportion. So our learning target is I can solve percent problems using a proportion. So let's go ahead and get started. Our percent proportion, there's two different ones written here. They both mean the exact same thing. Okay, so our first proportion is parts over the whole is equal to the percent out of 100. Okay? Now, you probably won't see in a problem, this is the part and this is the whole. What you will see, though, are the words is and of. So is really stands for the parts, and of really stands for the whole. Okay, so these are the words that you probably will see in a word problem. Okay, so just keep that in mind. And then our percent over 100 is still the exact same as it was in the first one. Okay, so again, these two are exactly the same. They just use different words. So let's go ahead and let's practice how we would set these up. So what we need to do is we need to find the parts and round each number to the nearest tenth if necessary. So our first problem, what is 20% of 75? Well, we know we need two proportions, okay? Our first one is the parts over the whole, or is over of. I'm just going to write that off to the side so we remember is over of. It is saying what is 20% of 75. Okay, so that 75 goes with the word of. So that means it goes on the bottom. That's our whole. Okay, we don't know what the is. So that's our x. And then the second one, I think, is the easiest ratio to set up because they give us 20%. And we know it's always over 100. Okay, so our second fraction is super easy to set up. So now we just need to cross multiply and solve. So this is a great review of last unit. X times 100 is 100x. And that's equal to 20 times 75. You can go ahead and get your calculator out. We're taking 20 times 75, which is 1500. All right, and now we need to solve for x. So remember, we divide by 100. So we get x is equal to 15. So 15 is 20% of 75. Awesome, moving on to the second one. It's saying what is 125% of 72. So since it has that of 72, that's the bottom, and we don't know what the is, so that's our x. And then our second ratio is super easy to set up because we find our percent, which is 125, and that's always over 100. Alright, so now we know how to solve these. This is a great review. We cross multiply. X times 100 is 100x, and that's equal to 72 times 125, which is 9,000. And now we just need to divide by 100 to get x by itself, and we get x is equal to 90. And that's our answer. Awesome, now we're going to work on finding the percent. So we round each number to the nearest tenth if necessary. So it is saying what percent of 60 is 15. Okay, so remember it's is over of. So our is 15 and our of is 60. But we don't know what percent that is. So our percent is x, but we always know it's over 100. Okay, so now we just need to cross multiply and solve. 15 times 100 is 1500, and that's equal to 60x. Alright, and now again we need to solve for x, so we divide by 60. And we get x on the right hand side, 1500, divided by 60 gives us 25. And this is where it gets tricky because in the two problems above we didn't need a label. But we're talking about percents. So we need to make sure we have the percent sign at the end of our answer for this problem. Okay, so that's our answer. Moving on to the second one. 440 is what percent of 400? So again, it says 440 is, and then we don't know the percent of 400. So again, it's is over of. Our is 440. Our of is 400. Set it equal to our percent, which we don't know, but we do know the bottom is always 100. So go ahead and cross multiply. 440 times 100 is 44,000. And that's equal to 400x. Alright, and now we need to divide by 400 to get x by itself. So we just get x on the right hand side. 44,000 divided by 400 is 110. But what are we talking about? Yeah, we're talking about percents. So we need the percent sign. Awesome, so that's how we find the percent. Now we're going to talk about how we find the whole. Okay, so we round our number to the nearest tenth again if we need to. So it's saying 40% of what number is 14. Okay, so it's always is over of. We do know our is 14, so that's the top number. We don't know what the of is, so that's our x. And then we know 40%, and that's always over 100. Okay, so let's go ahead and cross multiply and solve. 14 times 100 is 1400, and that's equal to 40x. Alright, now we need to divide by 40. 1400 divided by 40 gives us 35. And since we're talking about the whole, we do not need a label. It's not a percent. Alright, and our last problem of these. We have 125% of what number is 45. So again, it's is over of, so the 45 goes on the top. We don't know what the bottom is, the of, but we do know our percent is 125, and it's always over 100. Alright, so now we cross multiply. 45 times 100 is 4,500, and that's equal to 125x. Now we need to solve for x, so we need to divide by that 125 to get rid of it. So we're just left with x. 4,500 divided by 125 is 36. And that is our answer. Alright, so we have 3 more problems left. Now we're going to talk about applications and some word problems that you might see. Okay, so let's take a look at our first one. Faith got 35 questions correct on her science test. There were 40 questions on the test. What percent of the questions did Faith find correctly? Alright, so let's figure out what we're finding. Are we finding the part, the whole, or the percent? Right, it tells us, we are finding the percent. What percent of the questions did Faith solve correctly? So, this is what we put in this box. We are finding the percent. Okay, now in our second box, we're writing our proportion. Okay, well, we know we're finding the percent, and percent goes in the second fraction up at the top. And we know the percent is always over 100, so we can go ahead and fill that in right away. Now comes the tricky part. We need to figure out, is this 35 the part, or is it the whole? And is this 40 the part, or is it the whole? So to do that, let's reread our problem. Faith got 35 questions correct on her science test. There were 40 questions on the test. What percent of the questions did Faith answer correctly? So what we need to do is we need to figure out, is that 35 the part, or is it the whole? If we know there's 40 total questions on the test, that's our whole. So the 40 goes on the bottom, which leaves the 35 as our part. Okay, so now that we have our proportion set up, we can go ahead and cross multiply. 35 times 100 is 3,500, and that's equal to 40x. Okay, now we divide by 40. So we get 3,500 divided by 40 is 87.5. Now we need to be careful. What are we trying to find? Right, we're trying to find the percent. So in our answer, we need to put 87.5%. Alright, so that's our first problem. Way to go. Let's move on to the second one. Jorge scored 48% of his team's goals. If his team had a total of 50 goals, how many goals did Jorge score? Alright, so this one, we know the total. So we know the whole. We know the percent. What we don't know is the part. We don't know how many just Jorge scored. Okay, so now let's set up our proportion. We don't know the part, that's our x. But we do know their team scored a total of 50 goals. So that's the denominator. And then we know our percent is 48, and our denominator is always 100 on our percent. Okay, so now we can go ahead and cross multiply. X times 100 is 100x, and that's equal to 48 times 50, which is 2400. Alright, now we divide by 100 from both sides, so we get x is equal to 24. Now for our answer, we need to actually write what that 24 is talking about. It's talking about the number of goals that Jorge scored. So our answer is 24 goals. Alright, and moving on to the last problem. At Aubrey's pet store, 55% of the animals are dogs. If there are 44 dogs at the pet store, how many total pets are there? Alright, so we know the percent and we know the parts because we're trying to calculate the total. So that's our whole. That's what we're trying to find out. Okay, so let's set up our ratios. We don't know the whole, so the bottom is our x. But we know the part is 44. And then our percent is 55. And that's always over 100. So now let's cross multiply. 44 times 100 is 4400, and that's equal to 55x. We want x by itself, so we need to divide by 55. 4400 divided by 55 gives us 80. And now we need to figure out what that 80 means. It's asking the total pets. So that 80 stands for 80 pets. Alrighty, so that was our lesson on 6.3. If that did not make sense, please reach out to me so that I can get you the help that you need. Otherwise, I hope